Hello, class. Mr. Fino here. This is Unit 6, Lesson 3 on 3 Chinese philosophies. And those philosophies are Confucianism, which we have the symbol for Confucianism on the left, Legalism, and we have that in the middle, and Daoism, we have that on the right. So in this section, you will learn how Confucianism, Daoism, and legalism influence political rule in ancient China, which just means how these three belief systems influence how they ran their government, how they, construct the social structures, and all that. All right, so I'm going to start with a quick story that kind of explains the ideas of these three belief systems. All right, these 3 Chinese philosophies. So um, I want you to imagine the situation. Suppose it is 250 BCE, which is about 2,250 years ago. The ruler of a small kingdom has sent 3 advisors to learn about the 3 philosophies, those philosophies being Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism. Upon their return, he asks them, "What should I do to rule well?" So the first advisor has learned about Confucianism, so he tells the king, "Lead by example." The second advisor has studied Taoism and says, "If you must rule, rule as little as possible." The third advisor has learned about legalism and replies, "Set clear laws and harshly punish those who disobey them." So in this lesson, we'll learn about these 3 different ideas and how they influenced ancient China. So we're going to start here with the question, which dynasty came to power after the Shang? So that'd be the Zhou. So the Zhou, they were a group from northwestern China. So if we're looking at the map here, probably somewhere up here, northwestern China, and they overthrew the Shang. And we'll talk about what happened in that period and all the important stuff. So how did the Zhou justify their claim to power? So the Zhou used what was called the mandate of heaven to justify the right to rule China. The mandate of heaven said that the king was the son of heaven and that he had the divine right to rule over China. So kind of like he was chosen by the gods to do it. If the king did not rule well, people believed that heaven sent angry signs like earthquakes and floods. And these negative signs told the people that it was time to overthrow the current dynasty. So this graphic organizer image here shows kind of the cycle of the mandate of heaven. So it starts with a powerful new dynasty receives the mandate of heaven. The new emperor reforms the government and restores peace and harmony. Life improves for the people because the government provides both prosperity and protection. As generations pass, the new dynasty grows old and corrupt. The government raises taxes and forces men into the emperor's service. The old dynasty loses the mandate of heaven, probably through things like were mentioned there, bad stuff happening like earthquakes, floods, maybe warfare. Disasters such as droughts, floods, famine, or enemy invasions make life worse for the people. There you go. And then the people rebel and unite under a strong leader who defeats the emperor, and then that powerful new dynasty receives the mandate of heaven themselves. And that's how it works. So how did the Zhou rule over China? So the Zhou used a system of feudalism in which the king distributed land to his lords in exchange for army service. So the king gave land to the lords, and in exchange, the lords said, "Okay, well, we will provide army service, we'll provide soldiers," and the peasants were ruled over by the lords, but they were also given protection in exchange for some of their crops. So this image here kind of shows that exchange of land, protection, and from top to bottom. So how did the Zhou dynasty fall apart? Over time, some lords became extremely powerful, so powerful that they rivaled the king, right? A number of small states combined to form 6 or 7 larger ones, which were at war for about 250 years straight. So this was called the Warring States period. And here you can see on the right the different 6 or 7 states that were constantly at war, kind of trying to seize power over China. continuing on with that question, all this conflict led Chinese thinkers to ask important questions about human nature and about how to best govern. People were thinking, like, what's going on? How can we fix this? Right? So this time became known as the 100 Schools of Thought, right? Because all these ideas were circulating, and people are just trying to figure out how to fix it. And from all these ideas, the three major schools of thought were Confucianism, Daoism, and Legalism, which was mentioned right at the beginning. So first we'll look at Confucianism. So who was the founder of Confucianism? So Confuci was known to the West as Confucius, but his name was Confuci, experienced firsthand the disorder of the Warring States period. His home state was invaded many times, and there he is right there. So he knew all too well what, that things needed to get better, right? He was trying to think of ways to fix this horrible situation. Confucius sought to educate men of good character how to be honest and fair government officials, right? So that was his way of trying to fix things. So what were the main ideas of Confucianism? So the goal of Confucianism was to achieve a just and peaceful society, right? In direct opposition to this, all that was going on during the Warring States period. Confucius believed that people should follow standards of good behavior. And here we see the 5 basic relationships within Confucianism, right? So you've got, these relationships show someone on the top and someone on the bottom, someone in power and someone being subservient to that person. So we have the first relationship was ruler and subject. So that's the emperor, the king, and all these people, right? They were bowing to the emperor. Then we have husband and wife, which we see here. The wife is, to follow the husband. We've got father and son, right? So the son is supposed to respect and listen to the father. We've got older sibling and younger sibling, right? So youngest son, eldest son. And then we've got friend to friend. And that friend to friend relationship is probably going to depend on who has more power, who has the more important job, who's older, that sort of thing. Continuing on, the main ideas of Confucianism. Everyone was expected to respect those above them in status as well as their elders. Those higher in status were expected to set a good example, right? So it wasn't just all flowers and dandelions and people on top. They were expected to set a good example. If they didn't, that reflected poorly on them. And then this last quote, this is a quote of Confucius: "Do not do to others what you would not want done to you." So that's the golden rule, which amazingly, if we look at all the different religions, all the different cultures, it spans pretty much all of them. So you can see here in this graphic the example of the golden rule in each of these belief systems. So that's kind of cool. That they all came to the same conclusion. All right, so a couple more quotes, or one big quote here from Confucius was he once said to his follower, "The gentleman first practices what he preaches, and then preaches what he practices." So, right, so first, acting, right, practicing what you're saying you're going to do, and then preaching. Confucius also said to his student, "Shall I teach you what knowledge is? When you know a thing, say that you know it. When you do not know a thing, admit that you do not know it. That is knowledge." So, that's pretty much saying, if you don't know how to do something, don't pretend like you do. Be honest and, learn from your mistakes. And this question, how did Confucianism impact China? So after his death, Confucius' followers collected his sayings in a book called the Analects. In the Han Dynasty, the government hired civil servants, so people that worked in government, on the basis of their ability, right? That's an important idea within Confucianism. Before, these jobs went to the noble sons, so it was, family related. Civil servants took an exam that tested their knowledge of classic Chinese texts. And then this idea of respect for elders, proper behavior, and then, like a picture here, love of scholarship, so learning, right, are all major ideas in China and Chinese culture that came from Confucianism. These ideas still exist today. respect for elders, proper behavior, and love of scholarship. All right, next we have Daoism. So first, who was the founder of Daoism? According to tradition, Lao Tzu, let me just make sure I'm saying that right. Lao Tzu was the wise man that created Daoism, okay, according to tradition. Um, Lao Tzu is said to be the author of the Tao Te Ching, which translates to uh, the classic of the way and its power. So some believe Lao Tzu was a legend, and actually that the Tao Te Ching was written by many authors over time, and that's more likely that it was collected by many authors over time. All right, and then here's the story of how the supposedly legend, right? So we don't know for sure if this is true, how the Tao Te Ching was written. So legend says that after serving the Zhou Dynasty as an advisor, Lao Tzu grew tired of government work and left China at age 90. So that already says he's leaving he's on a yak, like traveling out of China. When he arrived at the border, a guard recognized him and begged him to write down his knowledge. This is said to be the Tao Te Ching. So here he is on the yak traveling outside of China into the mountains. Okay. What are the main ideas of Taoism? So the Tao, or the way, was the force that gave order to the natural universe. So it kind of explained everything happening in the world, right? And Taoism taught people to live in harmony with the Tao. So that's important. That's probably the most important thing you need to know of Taoism. It taught people to live in harmony with the Tao, to live in harmony with nature. To Taoists, nature is full of opposites, which come from yin and yang. So opposites like light and darkness, right? Life and death. And so they believe that it is possible to have good without bad, beauty without ugliness, or pleasure without pain. Taoists believe people should live quiet lives of meditation without seeking fame or material wealth. You just kind of go with the flow and take what life gives you. And Taoists believe the best rulers are those that rule the least. So a ruler that you don't see when things are going well and you don't see them, you don't hear from them, that would be the Taoist idea of a great ruler. So here's Lao Tzu, and he once said, if you do not want your house to be molested by robbers, do not fill it with gold and jade. Wealth, rank, and arrogance add up to ruin, as surely as 2 and 2 are 4. So he's saying, if you flaunt your material wealth, you're asking for ruin. You're asking for bad things to happen to you. And let me just touch real quick here. The long-term influence of Taoism. Taoism became an important religion in the world, and it became more important in Chinese thought, writing, and art than within government. All right, last idea. What is legalism? So legalism was based on the ideas of Han Feizu. So Han Feizu was a prince of the royal family Han Feizu. Legalists believe that people are naturally selfish, so that's Han Feizu, and will always pursue their own self-interest. So it's just human nature to be selfish and pursue your own self-interest. According to legalism, rulers need to establish strict laws and then enforce them with rewards for good behavior and harsh punishment for bad behavior. So very strict stuff. So this is a piece of art. So this illustration of the afterlife demonstrates the type of punishments legalists recommended for those who disobeyed the laws. So Han Feizu had very strict ideas on how to enforce order in society. So if you look at this picture, you can see just how strict and harsh and cruel the ideas of legalism were to many. So again, continuing on with what is legalism, they believe that civil servants, people that work for government, should be carefully monitored, right? So watched and making sure they're doing the right things, they're not being corrupt. They believe that people that criticize the government should be banished, and rulers should have absolute power through military might. So banishment here shows if you criticize the government, just banish people. If you don't like what's happening, go to the northern frontier and find how to live your life there. And then this idea of military might is important within legalism. How did legalism impact China? So at the end of the Warring States period, the Qin Dynasty took over. And with the Qin Dynasty, they rulers read and admired legalist writings, and their government was extremely strict and harsh and used laws excessively. And the Qin built a strong central government and severely punished critics. So there's the Qin on the left. You see it's one of the larger states that took over from the Zhou. And right here's a picture. Here's a picture of statues of Qin rulers. So here is again Han Feizu, and he once said, "He who trusts others will be controlled by others." So he believed that if you trust others, you're asking for bad stuff to happen to you. So in this section, we learned, not you will learn, how Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism influenced political rule in ancient China. All right, thank you.